Seniors, let me ask you an important question. What if the normal blood sugar numbers you've been told to aim for aren't actually optimal for healthy aging, and in some cases may even be working against you? Here's a surprising truth. Many older adults are told, as long as your blood sugar isn't too high, you're fine. But what the research shows is that blood sugar isn't just about avoiding diabetes. It's about protecting your brain, muscles, blood vessels, and long-term independence. Here's what's really going on inside your body. As we age, the way our bodies handle glucose changes. Muscles become less responsive to insulin. The liver becomes more likely to release sugar into the bloodstream. And the brain becomes more sensitive to both highs and lows in blood sugar. This means that the same glucose level that feels okay on paper can quietly accelerate fatigue, inflammation, cognitive decline, muscle loss, and cardiovascular risk. And this is where confusion sets in. Some guidelines say blood sugar can be higher in older adults to avoid hypoglycemia. Others push aggressive lowering, but very few explain what blood sugar range actually supports healthy aging, stable energy, and long-term resilience. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of blood sugar like the temperature in your home. If it's too high, things overheat and break down. If it's too low, systems shut off. But the real goal isn't just avoiding extremes, it's maintaining a steady, comfortable range where everything functions smoothly. Your organs don't just care about average blood sugar, they care about swings. Big spikes and crashes act like repeated stress tests on your blood vessels, nerves, kidneys, and brain. Over time, those swings do more damage than slightly elevated but stable numbers. This matters deeply after 60 because this is when small metabolic stresses compound faster. Blood sugar instability accelerates aging of the brain, weakens muscles, worsens balance, increases fall risk, and quietly fuels inflammation. But here's the empowering part. Blood sugar regulation remains highly modifiable, even later in life. And you don't need extreme diets, harsh medications, or constant finger pricks to improve it. In this talk, I want to walk you through the truth about blood sugar for older adults. Not fear-based numbers, but physiology-based targets. You'll learn what fasting and post-meal blood sugar ranges actually support longevity, why avoiding both highs and lows matters more after 60, how insulin, muscle, liver, and timing all interact, and how simple daily habits can stabilize blood sugar naturally. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post science-based content like this every day to help you optimize metabolism, energy, and healthy aging without hype or extremes. By the end of this talk, you'll have clarity, confidence, and practical tools to support your blood sugar in a way that protects your brain, body, and independence. Here's the first truth every senior deserves to understand, and it immediately clears up years of confusion. The best blood sugar for older adults is not simply as low as possible. It's a stable, well-tolerated range that protects the brain, muscles, and blood vessels without triggering dangerous lows. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Most lab reports list normal fasting blood sugar as anywhere from about 70 to 90 nanometer DL, but those ranges are designed to flag disease, not to guide optimal aging. They don't account for changes in muscle mass, liver function, nervous system sensitivity, or medication use that happen after 60. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of blood sugar like the oil pressure in a car engine. Too high, and parts wear down from stress and friction. Too low, and the engine doesn't get lubricated properly and starts to seize. The goal isn't the lowest number. The goal is smooth, consistent pressure that keeps everything running safely. After 60, the brain becomes especially sensitive to low blood sugar. Neurons rely almost entirely on glucose for fuel. Even mild hypoglycemia can cause dizziness, confusion, weakness, blurred vision, and increased fall risk, sometimes without obvious warning signs. At the same time, chronically elevated blood sugar damages blood vessels, stiffens arteries, accelerates cognitive decline, and worsens inflammation. So where is the sweet spot? What the research and geriatric metabolic data suggest is this. For most older adults, fasting blood sugar, that consistently falls roughly in the 85-100 milligauss DL range is often associated with better cognitive outcomes and lower mortality than aggressive lowering post-meal blood sugar that returns below 140 millar DL within 2 hours signals good metabolic control and, most importantly, minimal spikes and crashes throughout the day predict better aging than chasing perfect numbers. This is why doctors increasingly focus on time in range and variability, not just averages. Here's the key insight. Your body cares more about how often blood sugar stresses tissues than about one isolated reading. Big spikes activate oxidative stress. Big drops activate stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Both accelerate aging. Now here's something empowering. You can improve blood sugar stability without driving numbers dangerously low. The first tool is protein-first meals. Eating protein before carbohydrates slows glucose absorption and reduces insulin spikes. This is especially powerful at breakfast when insulin sensitivity is highest. Second, movement after meals. A 10-15-minute walk after eating acts like insulin. Muscles pull glucose out of the bloodstream without requiring more hormone. This lowers post-meal blood sugar safely. Third, avoid late-night eating. After sunset, insulin sensitivity drops and the liver releases more glucose. Eating late raises fasting blood sugar the next morning, even if the food itself is healthy. And finally, avoid aggressive restriction unless supervised. Very low-carb diets or medication-driven glucose lowering can increase hypoglycemia risk in seniors if not carefully tailored. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I share clear science-based strategies every day to help seniors protect metabolism, energy, and independence naturally. Here's the takeaway to remember. The best blood sugar after 60 is not about chasing the lowest number. It's about protecting the brain and body with stability. Here's the second truth about blood sugar in older adults, and this one surprises almost everyone. Insulin resistance after 60 often shows up first as muscle loss, fatigue, and balance problems, not high blood sugar on a lab report. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Insulin's main job is not to lower blood sugar. Its main job is to move nutrients into cells, especially muscle. When you're younger, muscle tissue is highly insulin sensitive. Glucose moves easily into muscle, where it's burned for energy or stored safely. Blood sugar stays stable almost automatically. But after 60, several things happen at once. Muscle mass naturally declines if it's not actively maintained. Muscle cells become less responsive to insulin. Physical activity often decreases, and fat tissue, especially visceral fat, becomes more metabolically active. The result is something subtle but important. Blood sugar can look acceptable, but insulin levels are quietly rising to compensate. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine a delivery truck trying to drop off packages at a warehouse. When the doors are open, deliveries are quick and efficient. But when the doors become stiff and hard to open, the driver has to keep honking, circling, and forcing the delivery. That honking is insulin. Early insulin resistance means the pancreas has to release more and more insulin to achieve the same effect. And high insulin itself accelerates aging by promoting inflammation, fat storage, and vascular damage. Now here's the critical insight for seniors. Muscle is the primary blood sugar regulator, not the pancreas. Every pound of muscle acts like a glucose sponge. When muscle mass declines, blood sugar control worsens even if diet doesn't change. This is why many older adults experience fatigue between meals, weakness or slower walking speed, loss of balance or grip strength, brain fog after eating, all while fasting glucose still looks normal. What the research shows is that muscle loss, sarcopenia, and insulin resistance often develop together. And once they do, blood sugar becomes harder to control and biological aging accelerates. So how do we address this at the root? The first tool is protein adequacy. Older adults require more protein per meal, not less, to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Most seniors undereat protein at breakfast, which leads to muscle breakdown and blood sugar instability later in the day. Aim for a meaningful protein dose earlier in the day. eggs, Greek yogurt, fish, or legumes paired appropriately. Second, resistance-style movement is essential. This doesn't mean heavy weights. Chair exercises, resistance bands, body weight movements, even twice per week, dramatically improve insulin sensitivity in older adults. Muscle contraction allows glucose to enter cells without insulin, immediately lowering blood sugar. Third, avoid long sedentary stretches. Sitting for hours tells muscle it's not needed. Short movement breaks restore glucose uptake and improve circulation. And fourth, ensure adequate sleep. Poor sleep worsens insulin resistance the very next day. After 60, even small sleep disruptions have larger metabolic effects. Here's the key takeaway. If blood sugar feels harder to control with age, the problem is often muscle signaling, not willpower or food alone. Protect muscle and blood sugar becomes easier to manage. If your morning blood sugar is high, the problem is often your liver, not sugar, not carbs, and not dinner. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your liver is not just a detox organ, it's also your body's overnight glucose manager. While you sleep, your brain still needs a steady supply of glucose. To make that happen, the liver releases stored glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. In a healthy metabolic system, this release is tightly controlled by insulin and counterbalanced by muscle uptake. But after 60, liver insulin sensitivity often declines, especially under stress. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your liver as a thermostat-controlled furnace. At night, it turns on just enough heat to keep the house warm. But when the thermostat is broken, the furnace keeps blasting heat even when it's not needed. That broken thermostat is insulin resistance at the liver level. When the liver becomes insulin resistant, it releases too much glucose, especially in the early morning hours. This is known as the dawn phenomenon, and it's incredibly common in older adults. What makes this worse? Stress hormones. Cortisol and adrenaline naturally rise between 4 and 8 a.m. to help you wake up. But chronic stress, poor sleep, or inflammation amplify this signal, telling the liver to dump even more glucose into the bloodstream. This is why someone can eat a low-sugar dinner, skip dessert, go to bed with normal glucose, and still wake up with high blood sugar. It's not dietary failure, it's hormonal signaling. What the research shows is that elevated fasting glucose in seniors is often driven by hepatic insulin resistance, not excessive carbohydrate intake. So how do we fix this at the root? First, evening habits matter more than dinner macros. Late night stress, news exposure, emotional conversations, or poor sleep increase cortisol, which directly signals the liver to release glucose. A simple wind-down routine can lower fasting glucose measurably within days. Second, avoid very late-night snacking, especially refined carbohydrates. Eating too close to bedtime keeps insulin elevated overnight, which paradoxically worsens liver insulin sensitivity by morning. A gentle 12-14 hour overnight fasting window is often ideal for older adults. Not aggressive fasting, just consistency. Third, support liver health nutritionally. Adequate magnesium, B vitamins, and choline help regulate glucose production and insulin signaling in the liver. Bitter greens, cruciferous vegetables, and healthy fats also support hepatic function. Fourth, light evening movement helps. A short walk after dinner improves glucose uptake and signals the liver that excess glucose is not needed overnight. And here's a critical mindset shift for seniors. You don't need to chase perfect morning numbers every single day. Instead, look for patterns over time and focus on liver calmness, sleep quality, and stress regulation. If this explanation is clicking for you, take a moment to like the video and consider subscribing. I post science-based practical guidance like this every day to help you age with strength and clarity. Now, coming up next, we'll address a dangerous myth many seniors are told about tight blood sugar control, and why too low glucose can be more harmful than slightly elevated levels after 65. One of the biggest myths in senior health is this idea that lower blood sugar is always better. Here's the truth. After 60, blood sugar that is too low can be more dangerous than blood sugar that is mildly elevated. Here's what's really going on inside your body. As we age, the brain becomes less tolerant of glucose drops. Neurons rely almost entirely on glucose for fuel, and unlike muscles, they can't store it. At the same time, the body's early warning systems weaken. You don't feel low blood sugar the way you used to. That shaky, sweaty feeling, it often disappears with age, even while glucose is dropping to dangerous levels. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of blood sugar like oil pressure in an older car. Too high for too long causes wear and tear, but too low, even briefly, can seize the engine. In seniors, hypoglycemia is linked to falls and fractures, confusion and memory loss, heart rhythm disturbances, increased risk of dementia, higher mortality. What the research shows is striking. Large studies of older adults with diabetes found that aggressive glucose lowering increased hospitalizations and death, especially when A1C targets were pushed too low. That's why major medical organizations now recommend relaxed glucose targets for older adults, particularly those over 65 or with other health conditions. So what is a healthy range? For many seniors, fasting glucose in the 90-110 mmHg range is often acceptable. Post-meal glucose under 140-160 mmHg may be safer than trying to stay under 120 at all costs. A1C targets are often individualized, commonly 7.0-7.5%, sometimes higher depending on context. This is not about being careless. It's about protecting the brain and nervous system while maintaining metabolic stability. Now here's the root cause issue most people miss. Low blood sugar episodes don't usually happen because someone ate too little sugar. They happen because insulin stays elevated too long. Meals lack protein and fat buffering medications overshoot physiological needs. Muscle mass is low, reducing glucose storage capacity, which brings us back to muscle. Muscle is your primary glucose shock absorber. When you lose muscle, a condition called sarcopenia, blood sugar becomes more volatile. It spikes higher and crashes faster. That's why seniors with low muscle mass often experience both high fasting glucose and dangerous lows. So the solution is not tighter restriction. The solution is stability. That means eating balanced meals with protein first, avoiding long fasting windows unless medically supervised, supporting muscle through resistance training, avoiding reactive insulin spikes. And most importantly, it means not chasing numbers in isolation. Blood sugar is a signal, not a scorecard. If you're finding this helpful, remember to subscribe. I post evidence-based, senior-focused metabolic guidance daily, without fear tactics or extreme advice. Up next, we're going to talk about the most powerful, underused tool seniors have for blood sugar control. And it's not food, not medication, and not supplements. If there is one intervention that improves blood sugar independent of diet, medication, or supplements, it is this: muscle contraction. Not muscle size, not bodybuilding, just muscle being used. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When a muscle contracts, it can pull glucose out of the bloodstream without insulin. This happens through a pathway called GLUT4 translocation. Think of it as muscle opening its own glucose doors. That matters enormously for seniors because with age, insulin signaling becomes slower and less reliable. The pancreas works harder. Insulin hangs around longer. Blood sugar becomes unpredictable. But muscle contraction bypasses that entire problem. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine insulin is a key that opens doors for glucose to enter cells. Over time, the locks get rusty. Muscle contraction is like opening the window instead. No key required. This is why even 10 minutes of movement after a meal can dramatically blunt glucose spikes. Research consistently shows that light resistance exercise improves insulin sensitivity in older adults. Walking after meals reduces post-meal glucose more than walking at other times. Muscle activity improves glucose control, even in people with advanced insulin resistance. And here's the part most seniors never hear. You do not need intense workouts. You need frequent muscle signals. That means standing up and sitting down repeatedly, carrying groceries, wall push-ups, resistance bands, slow, controlled movements. Even short bouts matter. What the research shows is that frequency beats intensity for metabolic health in older adults. Now let's connect this to blood sugar stability. When muscles are used regularly, glucose is cleared more smoothly. Insulin doesn't overshoot, blood sugar crashes are less likely, the liver produces less emergency glucose. This directly reduces both high spikes and dangerous lows. Here's a simple, realistic protocol for seniors. After your largest meal of the day, 5-10 minutes of light walking or 2-3 basic resistance movements. Focus on legs and large muscle groups. This alone can lower post-meal glucose by 20-40 mg/dL in some individuals. And here's the deeper benefit. Muscle sends anti-inflammatory and anti-aging signals called myokines. These improve brain health, vascular function, and even immune resilience. So you're not just managing blood sugar, you're protecting cognition, balance, and longevity. If this insight is helping you rethink blood sugar control, consider subscribing. I share practical, science-backed strategies like this every day, especially for adults over 60 who want stability, not extremes. Next, we're going to talk about something subtle but critical, how hydration and electrolytes affect blood sugar in seniors, and why drinking water the wrong way can actually worsen glucose readings. Let's talk about hydration, electrolytes, and blood sugar, because for older adults, this connection is far deeper than most people realize. Here's what's really going on inside your body. As we age, the brain's thirst signal becomes less sensitive. At the same time, kidney function changes, medications increase fluid loss, and muscle mass, which holds water, gradually declines. The result? Many seniors are chronically mildly dehydrated without realizing it, and dehydration directly raises blood sugar. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your bloodstream is a river carrying glucose. When there's enough water, the sugar is diluted and flows smoothly. When you're dehydrated, that river shrinks, and the glucose becomes more concentrated. Same amount of sugar, higher blood sugar reading. This is not theoretical. Research shows that even mild dehydration increases, fasting glucose stress hormones like cortisol insulin resistance. The liver, sensing low blood volume, releases more glucose as part of a stress response. So some seniors think, my blood sugar is high, I must be eating wrong, when in reality, they're just not hydrated correctly. Now here's the important nuance. Drinking more water is not always the answer, because after 60, electrolyte balance matters more than volume. If you drink large amounts of plain water without enough sodium, potassium, or magnesium, blood volume can actually drop, hormones like aldosterone spike. Blood sugar can become less stable. This is why some seniors feel dizzy, weak, or shaky after hydrating. The body is struggling to keep minerals in balance. What the research shows is that hydration with electrolytes improves insulin sensitivity and glucose regulation, especially in older adults. So here's a senior-friendly hydration protocol that actually supports blood sugar. In the morning, 1-2 cups of water. Add a pinch of natural salt or a sugar-free electrolyte mix. Before meals, small sips of water, not large volumes. During meals, avoid chugging. It dilutes stomach acid and worsens digestion. After meals, light hydration paired with gentle movement. Magnesium plays a special role here. Magnesium deficiency is extremely common in older adults and is directly linked to insulin resistance. Studies show that magnesium supplementation improves fasting glucose and A1C, especially in people over 60. Food sources, leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, almonds, or a low-dose supplement if approved by a healthcare provider. Here's a key point worth repeating. Hydration stabilizes blood sugar only when minerals are present. Water without electrolytes can actually increase glucose variability. This is especially important for seniors who take diuretics, have low blood pressure, experience dizziness or fatigue, notice glucose swings without dietary changes. In the next section, we'll bring everything together and talk about what blood sugar numbers actually make sense for older adults and why chasing young adult targets can backfire, because many seniors are being told to chase blood sugar targets that were never designed for aging physiology. Here's what's really going on inside your body. As we age, the brain becomes more sensitive to low glucose, not high glucose. Neurons depend almost entirely on glucose for fuel, and aging brains have less metabolic flexibility. That means aggressive blood sugar lowering can increase the risk of confusion, falls, fainting, heart rhythm issues, and even cognitive decline. Yet many older adults are still told, lower is always better. That's not true. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of blood sugar like the oil level in a car engine. Too high is damaging. It gums things up over time. But too low? That's immediate danger. For seniors, stability matters more than perfection. What the research shows is that moderately controlled, stable glucose leads to better outcomes than tightly controlled glucose with frequent dips. Large population studies in older adults show higher mortality with overly aggressive glucose targets, increased hypoglycemia-related hospitalizations, worse cognitive outcomes when blood sugar drops too low. So what numbers actually make sense? For most healthy older adults, fasting glucose, 90-110 mg/dl. Post-meal glucose, 1 to 2 hours, under 160-180 mg/dl A1C, around 6.5-7.5%, depending on individual health. These are not loose targets. They are protective targets. They reduce long-term vascular damage while avoiding acute neurological risk. Now, here's the nuance most people miss. Blood sugar variability matters more than a single number. If your glucose swings from 70 to 190 every day, that's far more damaging than sitting steadily around 110-140. Those swings drive oxidative stress, inflammation, endothelial damage, hormonal instability, and they exhaust the nervous system. So instead of asking, how low can I get my blood sugar? A better question is, how stable can I keep it? This reframes everything. It shifts focus from restriction to rhythm, from fear to feedback, from punishment to physiology. Here's a simple, stability-focused checklist for seniors. Eat consistent meals, avoid long fasts unless medically supervised. Pair carbohydrates with protein and fat. Use gentle movement after meals. Hydrate with electrolytes. Prioritize sleep. Each of these smooths the glucose curve. Another critical factor is nighttime blood sugar. Many seniors experience nocturnal hypoglycemia, especially if dinner is too light or medications peak overnight. Waking up tired, shaky, or anxious can be a sign of overnight glucose drops, not poor sleep. In those cases, slightly higher evening glucose is actually protective. This is why personalized targets matter. Age, medications, activity level, kidney function, and cognition all influence what optimal means. And this is why chasing someone else's numbers, or numbers from your 30s, can backfire. In the next section, we'll bring this full circle and talk about how to personalize blood sugar goals without fear, using feedback instead of rigid rules, and how seniors can work with their bodies instead of fighting them. Let's step back and look at the big picture. Blood sugar after 60 is not about chasing youth. It's about protecting the brain, the heart, the muscles, and the nervous system, while preserving energy, clarity, and independence. Here's what we've uncovered together. First, there is no single perfect blood sugar number for all seniors. What matters is context, age, medications, muscle mass, sleep, stress, and daily rhythm. Second, aging changes physiology. The liver releases glucose differently. Muscle becomes more insulin resistant. The brain becomes more vulnerable to low blood sugar. That means the goal shifts from as low as possible to stable and safe. Third, what the research shows clearly is that blood sugar variability is more damaging than slightly higher averages. Big swings create inflammation, oxidative stress, and hormonal chaos. Stability creates resilience.